All right, everybody, we are going to be playing some Dragon's Dogma 2. And here's my archer, but something feels just a little bit off for my taste. Hold on, let me pull in the menu. Bum, bum, bum. And one, two, there we go. All right, we are set. It is now time for some archery. So what I want to do with this one here is go over the archery system of the game, and I want to kind of incorporate it with real-world archery. I'm going to kind of splice it in between my shooting, trying to do the move sets of the game, see the viability of different things, and also just have some fun playing the game as well. So it's going to be a bit of a 50-50. I'm going to play through, kind of talk about my thoughts on the game, but also how I think it pertains to real-life archery and how that would be affected in this universe and in this world. And also just kind of a mini review, my first few hours of the game, how I feel like it stacks up. Now, the first thing you can see in-game is they went with a back quiver. Now, I don't have a problem with a back quiver per se. It can be used on horseback and everything. I prefer one that goes on the waist because I just feel like it works a lot better. But aesthetically, the back looks better, so I understand that. No problems there. Here's my archer, who I made a little bit too tall, but as you guys probably know at this point, you can't actually change your character, so he's just going to be some giant. As far as the quest structure and everything, it's very standard RPG fare. I enjoy kind of the freedom of the game. And so this is going to be kind of like a two-part, first impressions of it, and then also going into the archery system as I get into some combat, mixing up the different move sets, and just kind of figuring out how things work. So you'll have to forgive my skill here. I'm still figuring this out. But the thing that I like first off, just first impressions of the game, is it feels like the archery system has weight to it. And there's a few things in me that make an archery system fun to play as a gamer and then also as an archer is you want to feel like you're actually doing damage with it. It doesn't want to feel like it's just punching into nothing. The thing you can do in the game is walk with a full draw or even just hold it indefinitely. Now, there's not necessarily a fatigue part of it, so that's not a big deal, but with a bow like this is the 130, I'll pull it, and I can walk with it. That's doable, but if I get up to a heavier bow, let's say this 155-pound bow, to get a draw, hold it, and walk, it's possible, but it's very fatiguing. And so with just the initial onset of it, moving around, picking off people from afar, the aiming system is good. I'm a little sluggish with it. I'll get that refined, but you kind of have that quasi lock on. That's the other thing that's a little funky, is unlike a lot of other games like Elden Ring and things, there's no real lock on system for it. You kind of lock on with the camera. Now here's my main pawn. A lot of people probably make it or use some other ones that are online by Capcom, but this is Wifey. This is my wife right here. So I kind of decided that it would be fun to play a game with her. So she's rolling around. She's the fighter class just because in real life that's kind of the role she fills. She's the brazen head on and I'm a little bit more of the archer. So I think that's a really fun thing just to kind of do and just have that little extension of reality into the game. She's not one for small talk, that's for sure, nor is my wife. So it kind of lines up perfectly there. Now here I'm going to be using the Barrage Shot, which is kind of the first ability you get as an archer, where he kind of puts two arrows on it at the same time and then knocks one and then the other in rapid succession. So the one thing though I'm not entirely certain of is the Barrage Shot, how they're setting that up. So when they do it, as opposed to one arrow, they're kind of setting up two here, and it almost looks like they're putting two arrows on the string, so to speak, and then they're basically running through one and then running through the other. Anyone who shoots knows you really can't do trick shots like that there. So I don't know. Historically, generally, it would be more in like, you would have here, so if you're rapid firing, you would put one there, and then you could put the other one there back. That takes an inordinate amount of skill to do. But in this game here, it almost looks like they're setting up two arrows on top here, and then putting it there. And so it's not as fast, but the more accurate look for shooting on the inside of the bow would be something like this, where you basically have an arrow set up here. You can set that one up, let's just say loose that, and then you can quickly set this one up on here and then draw that back real fast and take that shot as well. It's a good first opening moves, kind of adds a little bit of element of just a little more power to the archer class. There's going to be more that I go over as I continue playing in the first few hours of this game, but just as a whole, I like having that quick setup there, so you have that different variety in the move sets, and that action RPG element of it I really enjoy as well, because it's not so much the turn-based picking the different maneuvers. It's just like, all right, I can get these things and I can put them into action and aim them. So I think that's a really fun way to implement that in this particular game and system. So it's just more of a diverse archer class, and I feel like you have a lot more freedom to make it feel viable. One little attention to detail I think is really cool in the game is you'll notice when the bow is equipped, he has an arrow in his hand always. He kind of sets it right here. If I'm doing it, I prefer to have it like this, so it's set up on the string so I can just instantly grab right there and pull it back. But it's nice to see that there's always something there when you have it drawn, so it's just that offhand thing. I don't think a lot of games do that. It's like you just throw it on right away. But in this one, when you're moving through the terrain, you always have it on your hand. So that's a nice little nod or attention to detail. Now, range-wise as well, the bow seems to perform pretty well. You can hit your targets from a good distance across the map with not a lot of drop-off. So that's something that's really cool as well, because like that, you can do that. You can also down these creatures once they actually hit them. So it's really great against the flying things because it's a great way to bring them down and let your teammates or your pawns do that damage up close. So it's cool to have that extra power because it really does help with those flying animals or those flying creatures, so you can bring them down real quick and let your crew finish that off. So another great little incentive to be a good archer in this game. Now here's one example of something people have been complaining about. This is one of my pawns that just fell off a ladder. Basically, they were trying to climb down to engage someone in battle, I think, and just fell. So the pawns don't always make the best decisions. They tend to have a mind of their own or engage when they don't necessarily need to, or run out in front and fall off of things. So, you know, nothing's going to be perfect with AI, but they still feel like a good addition to the team, and they do heal you and handle themselves relatively well all in all. So here's a still frame of the archer in action. You can see this is a much more traditional type draw. He's got it basically to the eye almost, and so it's a more modern style of shooting. You can see, though, later on, and I'll go over that when he gets to the power shots and those other things, it does get a much deeper, heavier full draw, so that's a really cool addition also. You can see is when they're doing draws, they're doing much more of a modern Olympic style where they're coming to about here as opposed to an older, more traditional type draw where they're pulling back. 130-pound bow, and you can see in order to do like a quick shot, it's not that hard to get there, but you're not gonna have the same amount of power. So they're kind of drawing it about that far back. So it's quicker and it's able to shoot faster, but you're not gonna have that same power as opposed to a big full draw. Something more analogous to that. So here's kind of an example of how the quests work. This is a pretty standard fanfare fetch quest where there's some creatures that have set up near the village and you have to throw these things over there to kind of get them out. It's not too far from the village. You just kind of run over there and take care of that. So a lot of the quests are pretty standard fanfare fetch quests. Not a lot to them. It's not like The Witcher 3 necessarily, where you're really diving deep into this long personal story with each objective. It's just kind of click in a box. So that's one thing I think some people might be a little turned off of by the game, but I think the strongest point so far in this one is the combat, because you want to be in this world, you want to get better, and there's lots and lots of things to fight and lots of things to do. So I think it's not really that deep of a story, and the quests themselves aren't overly complicated or overly enjoyable, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it's fun to go from point A to B because it's filled with enemies and filled with ways to improve your skills to unlock, all that stuff. So I just throw these over here, and then basically after that's done, you kill the creature, and then you go back to the guy who assigned you the quest, and you're on your way again. So pretty standard fetch quest. You do also get a lot of negative status effects that pop up, so you kind of have to keep an eye on that there. And the other thing is your pawns do not stop talking. They are real chatty in this game, so they let you know if you have a negative status effect, if there's something to find. Just real helpful. Sometimes a little overly helpful, but the chatter is good because you're not playing online, so it's like, it's just, you know, you're having conversation with your pawns. So this is when it starts getting a little more fun. You start unlocking more abilities as you purchase them and level up. This is a dire arrow, so it's a real big power shot. So that has a lot of blowback or stagger ability, which is very helpful. Thus far though, my favorite shot in the game for the archer is the power shot, because it's just, you can see that they really are cranking it back to that full length. They get kind of this real dramatic pose, but I just like the idea that it's coming back at that full draw, and they kind of drop down and loose it like that, and it just feels like, especially when it hits the animations, it's very well done, and it's making it really fun to play as an archer because you feel like you actually have a little bit of power as opposed to just standing in the back and taking those pot shots. And then just for good measure, we're gonna do a power shot with a 155-pound bow. Oh, power. You have your zoom in shot right here. So you can kind of get longer range against particular enemies and pick them off from far. And again, there's very little drop off for those arrows. So that's one thing that's not super realistic, but it does well. And that's the scatter shot, where you can kind of hit multiple targets in a spray, so to speak. So a bit more diversity as we're continuing on. So now I have that in my arsenal, and we're going to try those moves out as the game progresses. So here's the first proper mini boss battle. This Cyclops just kind of comes through and it's go time. So he overall, it's just an introduction to the combat system. There I am just, you know, not locking on and figuring out how that works. So that power shot right there, you can see it's a very good thing to have in that arsenal. And the other cool thing is they can have weapons, they can drop weapons. You can aim for the eye to do additional damage and stagger. And so there's a good amount, but the one thing you cannot do in this game that I've discovered yet is roll. There's like a jump back maneuver, but as far as getting out of harm's way, you really have to be conscious of your surroundings and run before it gets too close. And the stagger or your exhaustion in this really is a problem too, because if you exhaust yourself, you are SOL for a few seconds unless one of your pawns come over and gives you a stamina boost. So you really have to be conscious of what you're doing, especially if you're playing as an archer, to make sure you keep that range and you're providing the necessary, you know, support for your team and actually hitting that target in a good spot to drop it down. So here's like the first stage where I get him down to the ground. Then after that, you know, he comes back up again with a larger health bar, but he doesn't have his club. You can climb on him, which is another really cool feature. So aside from the first Dragon's Dogma, I don't think there's ever really been a game where you can just kind of hang on. Maybe God of War, you're just hanging on this colossal beast and you're trying to stab them and they start trying to shake you off like that. So it's just like a really fun little additional thing. The climbing system in this is really cool. So I like that because it's a great extra added element of strategy, and it makes it a lot more fun to try to climb up some beast and bring him to the ground. You feel that much more like an adventurer, let's say. So here's an example of the power shot or full draw. You can see that it's really full tilt boogie going back the whole way. And that's a much better representation of what it would look like. 2 more hours in, I have a better bow at this time. I upgraded it a little bit as well. And I was running through the forest, and then I come across another Cyclops. And I'm like, well, I don't have 8 people with me this time, but let's try and see how it goes down. So it's a big learning curve, the aiming part of it. It's really better just to hit the R1 if you're on PlayStation, and you can take those aims that way. But it does slow you down, and it's hard to get that tuned in. Because when you aim in, you kind of have to use one thumb to put it in a little bit. And you can see here as well, I'm starting to fatigue and exhaust myself just by overdoing the arrows. So right here, I get to a point where I'm basically staggered. And so then he comes up on me, and I think I barely, oh, no, I don't make it. So that's one thing that is a little bit more complicated, is you really have to manage that stamina bar well and not get that tunnel vision when you're trying to do those attacks. This was a long fight, so I'll kind of skip to the end here. So the other thing that I do really like is you basically have an unlimited arrow supply. Unless you have specialty arrows like explosive arrows or tar arrows, you can just keep shooting ad infinitum. And so I enjoy that aspect of it, because the one thing that was like with Tears of the Kingdom, with that weapon degradation, just made it so hard to keep track of everything. And with this one, it's literally just like you feel like, all right, I got an unlimited quiver of arrows and I can just start pummeling this guy. And so I enjoy that part of it, because you don't have to micromanage everything. It's really just much more straight into the action, get going, and bring down some big creatures with your crew. And that's a really, really fun part of it. So here's the tail end of the battle. I finally get him down, or my team finally gets him down, and we're able to finish off that Cyclops. So a couple times I got close to death there, but your team does a good job of just keeping track of your health and stamina, so your pawns are really useful. So thus far, I will definitely say playing as an archer, Dragon Dogmas 2 has been a lot of fun. You feel like you have a lot more to contribute. Obviously you have a lot of pawns, so they help with the crowd control, so you can kind of stand back and do your thing. But unlike in Elden Ring or Dark Souls games where you feel like you're completely useless or overpowered on the other side, Skyrim, where you're completely overpowered as a stealth archer, this feels like a good middle ground where you have to use the different attributes and skills and figure out how to do it. And I'm looking forward to playing more. It's been a lot of fun. So if you guys like this type of stuff, I can continue playing through it. If not, no biggie, but fun so far. From an archer, I'm enjoying it. Also, as a PSA, you may have seen this going around. There's only one save file in this game, and there's an autosave feature, but that will override your main save or manual save. So if you get yourself in a tight spot or you die just before an enemy and you're stuck there, it's going to be tough. So you really got to make sure that when you are playing the game, you're taking the time to ensure that you're saving. Resting at the end is an additional one that can kind of save you from a bad autosave. But just be cognizant of that, because this kind of has a great potential for a game-breaking feature, so to say. So if you're not watching that, it can ruin hours and hours of progress. So just know, one save slot, that's all you're going to get. So just be careful out there, Arisen.